Not every smiling face wishes you well, and not every journey brings you back home in one piece. The story begins in a bustling Lagos market. Mr. John, a wealthy businessman in his late 40s, is haggling with a tailor about a traditional agbada he plans to wear for his family's reunion in his village this Christmas. John's jovial personality lights up the market, but his wife, Mary, stands in the background, her face shadowed by worry. She feels uneasy about their upcoming trip but keeps her thoughts to herself, hoping her prayers will suffice. As John and Mary drive home, the car radio plays a sermon about the importance of prayer during the festive season. Mary gently suggests they pray before their trip, but John dismisses her with a hearty laugh. Prayer? Mary, don't you know I've already planned everything? The car is serviced, the roads are safe, and I'm a careful driver. What could go wrong? Mary clutches her rosary tightly, silently interceding for her family. A worried Mary looking out of the car window at a fiery sunset, clutching her rosary, while John drives confidently. A worried Mary looking out of the car window at a fiery sunset, clutching her rosary, while John drives confidently. That night, as the family prepares for bed, an old friend of John's, Mr. Ade, visits unexpectedly. Ade is accompanied by a strange woman with piercing eyes. They bring gifts and insist on joining John's family for the trip to the village. Mary is unsettled by the woman's aura, but John dismisses her concerns, seeing it as a generous reunion gesture. A dimly lit living room with the mysterious woman seated stiffly, her eyes glowing faintly, as Mary observes her cautiously from the doorway. The convoy leaves early, with John leading in his SUV. Ade and the mysterious woman follow in another car. As they drive through winding roads, strange occurrences begin: sudden flat tires, inexplicable fogs, and a group of vultures blocking their path. Mary begs John to stop and pray, but he insists these are mere coincidences. A convoy stopped on a deserted road, surrounded by dense fog, as Mary kneels beside the car, praying fervently. At a junction, Ade suggests taking an uncharted route to save time. Mary protests vehemently, citing her premonition, but John reluctantly agrees after Ade insists. The new route takes them through a dense forest where eerie noises and strange lights unsettle everyone. In a dark forest path, with glowing eyes peering from the shadows as the convoy cautiously drives through. Midway through the forest, the cars abruptly stop. The mysterious woman begins chanting, revealing herself as a sorceress sent to destroy John. She unveils a dark grudge: John's success had overshadowed a distant relative's ambitions, and they sought revenge. Suddenly, a swarm of masked figures surrounds the vehicles. Mary, in the back seat, begins praying aloud, calling on divine intervention. Her fervent prayers disrupt the attackers, who fall into disarray. Mary glowing with an ethereal light, hands clasped in prayer, while the masked figures cower and retreat. A loud thunderclap echoes through the forest, and a blinding light appears. The attackers scatter, and the mysterious woman vanishes. A group of local hunters, hearing Mary's prayers, arrives to rescue the family. They reveal that the forest is known for strange disappearances, and that no one ventures there without spiritual protection. A group of hunters holding torches and machetes, standing protectively around the family as the forest begins to clear. The family finally arrives at their village, shaken but safe. John is a changed man, realizing the folly of relying solely on his plans. He gathers his extended family and leads them in a heartfelt prayer, apologizing to Mary for ignoring her warnings. An outdoor family gathering at dusk, with everyone holding hands in prayer, under the light of a crescent moon. The villagers reveal that the road Ade suggested was cursed, used by those who practice dark arts. Ade confesses that he was manipulated into leading John's family into the trap, and he seeks forgiveness. Mary, ever gracious, forgives him but warns him to seek redemption. A remorseful Ade kneeling before Mary and John, with villagers gathered in the background, some weeping and others nodding solemnly. John sharing his experience at the village's end-of-year festival, urging everyone to prioritize prayer and trust in divine protection. He builds a small chapel in the village as a token of gratitude and a reminder of the power of faith. A small, beautifully lit chapel surrounded by villagers, with children running and playing in the background. Weeks after the ordeal, John begins having strange dreams. In one, he sees the mysterious woman warning him that the battle is far from over. She claims that her master will not rest until John pays for his arrogance. Alarmed, John wakes up drenched in sweat and wakes Mary to tell her about the dream. Mary immediately kneels by the bedside and begins praying, declaring that no evil shall triumph over their household. The couple decides to intensify their spiritual lives, attending prayer meetings and dedicating time for family prayers. John and Mary kneeling together in prayer, with a faint glow surrounding them in the quiet of their bedroom. Back in Lagos, eerie things begin to happen. John's business partners complain of unexplained losses, a once loyal driver abruptly quits, and strange symbols appear outside their house. Mary enlists the help of a pastor and some prayer warriors, who perform a deliverance session for the entire family. During the session, the pastor reveals that remnants of the attack from the forest are lingering in John's life, because of unresolved spiritual covenants in his lineage. John is shaken, but determined to break these chains. A dramatic prayer session in the living room, with people fervently praying, and a faint, shadowy figure retreating in the background. John visits his father, Pa Ezekiel, in the village, to learn more about their ancestry. Pa Ezekiel reveals a shocking truth: John's great-grandfather was involved in a pact with a secret society to protect the family's wealth. The pact required annual sacrifices, but John's father abandoned the practice, causing the society to target future generations. John realizes that his success may have been a trigger for the attacks. Pa Ezekiel advises John to consult the village elders to break the covenant. An elderly man seated under a large baobab tree, his face weathered with time, while John sits before him with a notebook, listening intently. The elders perform a traditional cleansing ritual at the family's ancestral home. They slaughter a ram and use herbs to symbolically break the curse. However, the chief priest warns that the true victory lies in John's faith and consistency in prayer. Mary supports John throughout, constantly reminding him that faith, not fear, is their strongest weapon. A traditional ritual scene at dusk, with elders chanting around a fire and John standing solemnly with Mary by his side. With the cleansing done, John feels a heavy weight lifted from his shoulders. His dreams are no longer haunted, and his business begins to thrive again. However, he doesn't take his newfound peace for granted. John becomes an advocate for faith, speaking at community events and sharing his story to warn others about the importance of prayer and vigilance. Mary, too, becomes a role model for women in their community, teaching them to trust their intuition and strengthen their faith. A vibrant community gathering, with John speaking passionately on stage while Mary sits in the audience, smiling proudly. Months later, the mysterious woman appears again, but this time in a vision during a church service. She tries to intimidate John, but he boldly declares his faith, rebuking her in the name of God. The vision fades, and John feels an overwhelming sense of victory. This moment solidifies his belief that the spiritual battles he faced were not just personal, but part of a larger divine plan to strengthen his faith and influence others. A radiant church altar with John kneeling in prayer, a beam of light shining down on him while others look on in awe. Years later, John and Mary establish a foundation to support rural communities with spiritual and material resources. They build schools, clinics, and places of worship, ensuring their story continues to inspire generations. John's children, having witnessed their parents' journey, grow up with a strong foundation in faith and humility. A newly built community center with children playing outside, a signboard reading Faith and Grace Foundation, founded by Mr. and Mrs. John. As the story closes, an elderly John reflects on his journey with his grandchildren seated around him. Never forget, he tells them, prayer is the strongest weapon we have. It's not just about asking, it's about trusting that God is always watching over us, even in the darkest moments. The grandchildren nod eagerly, their eyes wide with wonder as they take in the lessons of their grandfather's remarkable life. Years later, John's first son, Samuel, now a successful lawyer in the city, faces his own spiritual trial. Samuel is engaged to a beautiful and ambitious woman, Clara, who seems perfect in every way. However, Mary, now an elderly matriarch, grows uneasy about the union. She senses a shadow around Clara and warns Samuel to seek divine guidance before proceeding. Samuel brushes off his mother's concerns, calling them old-fashioned superstitions. Despite Mary's warnings, he sets a date for the wedding. An elegant urban apartment with Samuel and Clara sitting on a couch, while Mary stands at the doorway, her expression filled with concern. One evening, Clara's true nature is revealed when Mary has a vivid dream. In the dream, she sees Clara standing before a dark altar, chanting and holding Samuel's photograph. When Mary wakes, she rushes to inform John, who urges her to intensify her prayers for their son. Mary confronts Clara subtly, inviting her to join the family for a prayer session. During the prayer, Clara grows visibly uncomfortable and suddenly flees the room, claiming to feel unwell. A family prayer session in a cozy living room, with Clara standing abruptly and looking pale, as Mary stares at her intently. Mary enlists the help of a trusted pastor, who leads the family in a series of prayers to uncover the truth. Through revelations during the prayers, it is revealed that Clara comes from a family with a history of occult practices. Her union with Samuel was orchestrated to bring wealth and power to her family through a spiritual pact. Samuel is devastated but finally acknowledges the wisdom of his mother's warnings. He ends the engagement and turns to his faith, seeking guidance and healing. A solemn scene in a church, with Samuel kneeling at the altar while Mary places a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Realizing the magnitude of spiritual battles across generations, John calls for a family meeting. He reminds his children of the family's history and the importance of staying vigilant in prayer. Together, they renew their covenant with God, dedicating their lives and future generations to faith and service. The family adopts a tradition of weekly prayers and fasting, ensuring that the lessons learned are never forgotten. The family gathered in a circle in their backyard, hands clasped in prayer, as sunlight breaks through the clouds above. Inspired by their story, neighbors and extended family members begin to seek guidance from John and Mary. The couple becomes pillars of their community, hosting prayer sessions, offering counseling, and sharing their journey. Their testimony spreads far and wide, drawing people from all walks of life to seek faith and healing. A large community gathering under a tree, with John and Mary seated at the center, surrounded by people listening attentively. Decades later, John and Mary's grandchildren carry on the family's legacy. Years after John and Mary think the spiritual battles are behind them, a strange event rocks the family. A mysterious letter arrives at their doorstep, written in red ink, warning them to stop their prayers or face the wrath of the ancestors. At first, John dismisses it as a prank, but Mary feels uneasy and insists they increase their prayers. The very next night, eerie sounds echo through the compound, whispers and footsteps, but no one is there when they check. The family is shaken, but John reminds everyone that fear is the enemy's weapon. They hold an all-night prayer vigil, calling for divine protection. A dimly lit compound at night, with John and Mary leading the family in fervent prayer, while shadows loom in the background. The family wakes up one morning to find their youngest grandson, David, missing from his room. His bed is undisturbed, and the door is locked from the inside. Panic grips the family as they search the entire village. The elders warn that this might be a retaliation from the unseen forces they had battled years ago. Mary collapses in tears, but John stands firm, declaring, "No power is greater than the Almighty." The village organizes a search party, and a local hunter claims he saw a boy matching David's description wandering near the forest. A dense forest at dawn, with a search party holding lanterns and sticks, their faces filled with determination and worry. The search party ventures deep into the forest, where they find David sitting calmly under a tree, surrounded by a strange circle of ashes. When they try to approach him, an unseen force pushes them back. David, speaking in a voice not his own, warns, "This family has crossed the line. Return or suffer." John steps forward, clutching his Bible, and begins to pray aloud. The unseen force resists, causing strong winds to whip through the trees, but John doesn't waver. Eventually, the winds die down, and David collapses into his grandfather's arms. A dramatic forest scene with John standing firm, holding a Bible against a swirling wind, while the rest of the search party watches. Back at home, David regains consciousness and tells the family he remembers being taken by shadowy figures who tried to force him to renounce his family's faith. He recounts how, in his moment of fear, he remembered his grandmother's words about calling on God in times of trouble. The family realizes this battle is not just about them, but a larger spiritual war aimed at silencing their faith and influence in the community. David sitting on a couch, surrounded by his family, as he narrates his chilling experience, his face pale but determined. The next day, a stranger arrives in the village, a wandering prophet who claims to have been led there by a vision. The prophet, a tall and commanding figure named Malachi, warns the family that their spiritual battles are escalating because they are on the brink of a breakthrough that will change many lives. Malachi insists on staying with the family for a week to guide them in intense prayers and fasting. During this time, he reveals that the attacks are orchestrated by a secret coven of individuals envious of the family's growing influence. A stern-looking prophet sitting in the family's living room, his staff resting beside him, as John and Mary listen intently. On the third night of the fasting and prayers, the family is attacked in their dreams. Each member wakes up screaming, describing visions of being chased or bound by chains. Malachi explains that these are attempts to weaken their faith. At midnight, strange shadows appear outside the house, moving erratically. Malachi leads the family in prayer, and the shadows seem to shrink and retreat. Suddenly, a loud bang shakes the house, but no one is harmed. A midnight scene with the family praying intensely inside the house, while shadowy figures linger outside, their forms melting into darkness. On the last day of the prayer and fasting, Malachi declares that the battle will end that night. He asks John and Mary to lead the family in a midnight prayer session. As they pray, a strong wind howls through the house, extinguishing candles and causing items to fall. The air grows heavy, and a voice booms, "You have defied us long enough." The family presses on in prayer, declaring victory. As they chant, a blinding light fills the room, and the oppressive presence vanishes. Malachi smiles, declaring, "The stronghold is broken. You are free." A dramatic scene of the family bathed in radiant light, their hands raised in triumph, while the shadows dissipate into nothingness. The family's victory becomes the talk of the village, inspiring others to seek faith and protection. John and Mary decide to document their experiences, turning their story into a book titled The Battles We Don't See. The book becomes a bestseller, spreading their message far and wide. Their family grows stronger, with each member actively contributing to the community. The legacy of faith and resilience they have built becomes a guiding light for generations to come. John and Mary holding a book with their family gathered around them, a crowd of villagers cheering in the background. Months after the family believes they've triumphed over their spiritual enemies, strange occurrences begin again, this time targeting the village as a whole. Crops start withering without reason, livestock fall ill, and an unexplainable sickness spreads among the villagers. One night, a respected elder in the community dreams of John's family surrounded by a glowing light, battling dark forces that hover over the village. He wakes up convinced that John's family holds the key to saving the village. The elder gathers the village council and pleads with them to seek John's guidance. Despite resistance from some who remain skeptical of his influence, the council agrees to involve the family. Image prompt. A tense village meeting held under a large tree, with the elder passionately speaking while others listen, some nodding in agreement and others skeptical. John, Mary, and their children join the council in assessing the village's troubles. Malachi, the prophet, returns unexpectedly, claiming to have been sent by divine guidance. He reveals that the village is under attack by a generational curse that had been dormant but was reawakened by jealous forces trying to destroy John's influence. Malachi urges the village to repent and unify in prayer, warning that the enemy thrives on division and strife. A solemn gathering at the village square with Malachi standing at the center, his staff raised, as villagers listen with a mix of fear and hope. As prayers intensify, Malachi receives a vision of an ancient shrine hidden deep in the forest, where sacrifices were once made to appease ancestral spirits. He explains that the shrine is the source of the curse and must be destroyed to break the stronghold over the village. A group of brave villagers, led by John and Malachi, ventures into the forest to locate the shrine. Armed with prayer and faith, they face eerie sounds and unsettling sights, but they press on. A thick forest shrouded in mist, with John, Malachi, and the villagers cautiously walking toward a faint glowing light in the distance. The group finds the shrine, a crumbling stone altar, covered in strange symbols. As they begin to pray, the atmosphere grows heavy, and the ground trembles. An otherworldly voice echoes, demanding they leave. Malachi instructs the group to chant louder, calling on divine power to break the curse. The shrine begins to crack, and a dark cloud rises from it, forming into a menacing figure. It attempts to attack the group, but a burst of light from their prayers causes it to dissipate, leaving the shrine in ruins. A dramatic scene of the shrine collapsing as a dark cloud dissipates, with villagers raising their hands in victory and prayer. With the shrine destroyed, the village begins to heal. The crops grow again. Livestock recover, and the sickness vanishes. The villagers, moved by the miraculous turn of events, adopt the tradition of community prayers, uniting under a shared faith. The village chief publicly acknowledges John and Mary's role in saving the community, urging everyone to draw lessons from their unwavering faith. A vibrant village scene with lush greenery, healthy livestock, and villagers celebrating in unity, while John and Mary stand at the center, smiling humbly. Despite the joy, Malachi leaves the village with a stern warning. The battles will come again, for as long as there is light, darkness will try to snuff it out. Remain steadfast in faith, for prayer is your only shield. John and Mary take these words to heart, ensuring that their children and grandchildren understand the importance of vigilance and spiritual strength. Malachi walking away from the village, his staff glowing faintly, while John and Mary watch from a distance, their faces determined. Years later, the village thrives as a beacon of faith and resilience. John and Mary's story is passed down as a legend, inspiring neighboring communities to adopt similar practices of prayer and unity. Their family becomes known as the Guardians of Light, and their influence spreads across the region. Even those who once opposed them now seek their guidance in times of trouble. A bustling marketplace in the village, with people smiling and trading, and a mural of John and Mary painted on a prominent wall, symbolizing their legacy.